so I'm going to talk today about women's MMA weight classes. If you've been following me on Twitter or Instagram much, might have seen that I've been posting about it every now and again for a number of months now. And this video is partly me bringing that together. But it's also prompted by a discussion I watched between Thought Slime and Sophie from Mars. They're two left-wing YouTubers. They were talking about an account, Twitter account I think it is, called Transvestigations, which is this ridiculous account where it investigates celebrities and decides they're all transgender. Some people just really need life. So anyway, they were at some point talking about Chris Cyborg. Apparently she's transgender according to this Transvestigations thing. And so Thought Slime and Sophie were discussing, like, why is it that, maybe Joe Rogan and other men who watch women's MMA enjoy watching the likes of Chris Cyborg. And it was suggested that maybe it was like they're looking at her and they're thinking, ooh, woo, step on me. In other words, they're looking at Chris Cyborg and they want her to dominate them. Now, I think it's nice that they think that, and I understand why they do, because it's actually kind of a left-wing thing to... I watched this video about fetishes and who's more likely to have a fetish if they're left-wing or right-wing. It's really funny. But anyway, I understand why they think that, and it's nice that they thought that. But sadly, they're very mistaken. I've been involved in martial arts college for 10 years now. I know that it's not true. That's not what it is. And in fact, what men are more likely to be thinking, and this is not all men, definitely a significant minority of men though, when they look at Chris Cyborg and other women who do MMA, they're more likely to be thinking they want to beat her down, and they can beat her down as well. That's another thing they're more likely to be thinking. So, I'm going to explain this. Now, I first thought to look into MMA weight classes last year when there was a whole bunch of furore about Alana McLaughlin and her being a trans woman doing an MMA fight. I've never really been interested in MMA, to be honest. I've been very focused on my Choy Lee Fut. And while I know that it is possible for Choy Lee Fut to be used in MMA, it's just not been really a thing. I've watched a few MMA fights, not really... They don't really do it for me, to be honest. So I've just sort of not taken much interest. So I have been aware, my whole life really, that I'm kind of heavy for my size. Very, very solid I am. And so I did weigh myself a little while back at the beginning of August, and I'm under 5'2", and I weighed at that time 179 pounds. I thought it'd be interesting to ask Alana McLaughlin what weight she was, because she's a trans woman fighting and people are, oh my god, she's going to just slay everybody in her path or something, or all the cis women in her path. And she told me that she fights at 145 pounds. I thought, wow, yeah, see, she's way lighter than me. I didn't think anything more of it for a little while, and then it occurred to me that it might be interesting to see what weight class I would be in if I was to fight in MMA. I was really shocked to discover that I wouldn't be in any weight class, because that 145 pounds is the highest weight in MMA for women. Certainly in UFC, I think I read an article that seems to suggest that you can go up to 155 pounds, but I don't know how official that is or how common that is. It certainly doesn't happen in UFC or Bellator. So that was pretty shocking and annoying. And I just sort of assumed to start with that it would be a similar thing for boxing and wrestling. But then someone retweeted into my feed a woman heavyweight boxer talking about how, some fight she was signed up for had been cancelled and she was really annoyed about it. I thought, heavyweight boxer woman. A woman doing heavyweight boxing, a heavyweight woman doing boxing, what? So I looked up boxing weight classes, and I was pretty shocked to find that boxing for women, the weight classes are effectively unlimited. And it occurred to me, I realised at this point, that there was something in particular going on in MMA. And then I got something about wrestling retweeted into my feed. I thought, oh, okay, I should look up wrestling as well, shouldn't I? And, well, Olympic wrestling, I think I came up with Olympic wrestling to start with. And Olympic wrestling is, for women, is limited to £167. And actually, women's Olympic boxing is limited to £165, and that's wrong. That's not fair, and it would limit me as well, by the way. I wouldn't be able to do either boxing or wrestling in the Olympics because I weigh £179. So, this seemed to warrant more investigation. That was pretty annoying. So I found this article about women's wrestling. It was about Adeline Gray, the 167-pound heavyweight champion of the world. So she's a wrestler. Now, interesting thing, in US wrestling, the women's weight classes go up to 200. There's the NCWA. This is for freestyle wrestling. In NCAA, recognised women's wrestling, goes up to £200. So I'd be able to do that. Cool. Women's college wrestling goes up to £191. I'd be able to do that. And they've done like female youths aged 14 to 15 up to £146. When I was that age, I would have been able to do that. And then cadet 16 to 17, £161. I'd have been able to do that at that age. And then I think this is the 18 to 20, up to £168. I would have been able to do that at that age. Because I was quite a lot thinner when I was 20, basically. So even though I was kind of heavy for my size, I'd look small in comparison to people of the same weight as me, but I would have still been able to do that. So that was so that's the wrestling. The women's wrestling is still limited, but I would actually be able to do that. So that's there's a difference. So Gray is technically the heavyweight champion of the world because she's won 5 world titles. But the heaviest women's weight class is £167. I am not a super heavyweight, Gray explained. I'm the average woman in the United States, and that means half the women in the United States can't compete in the sport because of the weight class restriction. So, yeah, that's pretty rubbish, I would say. And we talk about how sports is for everyone. I would like to push for that to be true, Gray explained. There's a lot of big women who shouldn't have to lose 30 and 40 and 50 pounds just so they can do our sport. One of those women cutting weight just to compete is Sydney Kimber. Last month, Kimber won the £191 National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships. With the victory, Kimber, who attends McKendree University in Illinois, qualified for this week's US Olympic trial. This is from like last year, by the way, this article. So anyway, because there is no £191 or even £180 Olympic weight class, Kimber is currently in process of cutting close to £20 in order to compete for a spot at the Tokyo Games. While Kimber says she is committed to cutting weight in a safe and healthy way, she also knows that there are inherent risks that come with that process. It's hard putting your body through cutting 10, 15, 20 pounds, she explained in a phone interview earlier this week. It is kind of unfortunate that I have to put my body at risk to compete and pursue dreams like making Olympic teams or world teams. because this is world teams as well, by the way. Those weight classes I was telling you about, they only operate in the US. When you're talking about world wrestling, the weight classes are a lot more limited. So they talk a bit about here, breaking the link between fitness and thinness. Society has created a strong association between fitness and thinness, especially when it comes to female athletes. In sports, men are often celebrated for bulking up, especially if you're talking about things like fighting, MMA, while women are told to slim down. In 2019, US runner Mary Cain helped continue a conversation about weight loss and body shaming when she opened up to the NY Times about her experience at the Nike Oregon project. In a video essay, Cain explained how male coaches were convinced that in order to become faster, I had to become thinner and thinner and thinner. And I read that article, and it was pretty horrific, really. She was made to stop eating to the extent that she became nutritionally deficient, and her period stopped. That was how bad it was for her. And she actually got slower and slower. When she first joined that program, she was the fastest girl in the USA, and then when she joined the program, after that, she became slower. And her coach's only answer was for her to get thinner. And it's so ridiculous. And women's bodies are not that different, okay? If you tell them, you would not have men being told they should get thinner to that extent in order to be fitter, and like it said, they'd say you should bulk up. Look at male sprinters and stuff. So ridiculous. There are girls that are just naturally heavier. Kimber explained this, the woman who's having to lose weight to compete in the Olympics. I'm never going to be a skinny little twig. When I'm in my 180 pound range, that's when I feel healthiest, and that's when my body feels really good. And I've got to concur with that. Like I said, back in when I was about 20, I would have been much closer to 145 pounds, but I wouldn't have looked that much thin. I was quite thin, to be honest. I mean, I had a childhood of being starved, and I suffered with eating disorders in my late teens. So I was a bit thin, really, but I wasn't like a skinny twig. I mean, it's certainly, I'm not someone who would ever look really skinny. I'm not someone who would ever look like a stick insect. So since I've been getting into martial arts, and I've been doing this for 10 years now, like I said, I haven't got lighter, I've got heavier. And now I'm not at my heaviest. There was a period in my 20s when I was on a lot of medication for depression and stuff. I was heavier then, but I was obviously fatter. It's not like that now. And, it's because it's gone into the muscle. And, if you look at my channel, you'll see a number of videos where I do some very high energy videos of me doing forms like double hook swords. Now, double hook swords was the first really high energy video that I did, and I needed to get better for that. I needed to get fitter for that. I wasn't ever thinking I need to eat less and become thinner. What I thought was I need to do more exercises, I need to do more fitness exercises so I can become fitter and increase my stamina. And that's what I did. And of course, when I'm doing those fitness exercises, what I'm doing is bulking up, getting more muscle. I'm not getting thinner particularly. And I've had to do it a few times. I had to do it for the next video I did after the double hook swords. And I've had to do it a few times since. I had to do it for my most recent video. So, and I know if I were to cut down to 145 pounds, that's going to eat into my muscle mass. I will not be the same. If I were to fight in MMA and cut down to that, it wouldn't be the same. I would not be as good at fighting as I am at the weight that I am now. It just wouldn't work. And to expect it to work is utterly ridiculous. But that's misogyny for you. So there's another article I found in MMA Suckers. It starts here? No, not here. So this is the beginning of it. Women's featherweight is no longer a UFC problem but an MMA problem. This year, Bellator has slowly been letting their 145-pound women go, blah, blah, blah. Now, he talks a bit about the various issues, who's in and who isn't, and that kind of thing. One of the things he talks about is how the 145-pound division is often dominated by Chris Cyborg and Amanda Nunes or someone like that. And really what's happening there is that they're like the one good fighter and they can just squash everybody else because the other people aren't that great, aren't as good as them. And then another thing is that he talks about is that new talent flows in at a glacial pace. And so it takes a long time, he says, for women to get through, you know, from lessons to amateur fighting up to UFC and Bellator. He also says that the existence of heavyweight division, women's weight divisions, not only have their own struggles, but it actively hurts divisions like bantamweight. While bantamweight already isn't miles deep by any means, the occasional forays of bantamweights to featherweights thin it out even more. Holly Holm, Aspen Ladd, Norma Dumont and Jermaine Durandamy have all fought at both weight classes in the UFC, creating less opportunity for other bantamweights to get ranked opponents. So it kind of means that it's just causing trouble across the whole thing, to be honest with you. So he does portray some solutions. First thing is double efforts to develop new talent. So he says that really what they need to do is hand out developmental deals to a dozen fighters and give them access to the UFC Performance Institute to speed their progress. So basically, women are not getting the money put into them at a lower stage, which they do need. I mean, it's not like it doesn't pay well, and it takes a lot of, you know, time. If you're doing like a full-time job, it's really hard to train properly. I mean, I can train as much as I do because I work. So I'm lucky in that respect, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. A lot of women don't have that luxury. Next thing he says is create a women's heavyweight division. Instead of spreading the talent pool thin between bantamweight and lightweight, an extended weight class to lump them into one division could be an exciting experience. The range could be from 136 to 156 pounds or 145 to 165 pounds. If the division eventually becomes too bloated, then the time is right to split it up back into 145 pounds and 155 pounds. So that's an interesting one. He suggests a slightly higher division. So I think he could go further, personally, so that I could actually fight in MMA. Not that I really want to. I'm just really annoyed that I'm totally excluded. It's really annoying, whether I want to or not. And then fold some divisions. So he's talking about, saying like maybe all except for UFC, get rid of their 145, their featherweight categories, and so that all the featherweight women would go in UFC or something like that. I will be honest, I don't think Dana White would like that. I also read an article recently about how is from like April last year, I think, that Dana White's essentially trying to kill that division. He doesn't like even women up to 145 pounds fighting because he's a misogynist piece of shit. Also, yeah, he says, yeah, this isn't sustainable. So, I've got to say, right, one thing I noticed here is that this guy who wrote the MMA article about MMA didn't actually talk to any women, whereas the person who was doing the wrestling one, he actually did talk to some women, clearly. Oh yeah, this one was posted in April, NBC Sports. So, yeah, that's kind of annoying. Now, I like to play a fun game, right? So after I discovered this whole thing about weight classes, first thing I thought was, look up Conor McGregor. What weight division does he fight in? I had a slightly sneaking suspicion he might be lower than me, and lo and behold he is. He fights at 155 pounds, whereas I, obviously, would be 2 weight classes higher than him. Now, I guess I could cut to welterweight if I really wanted to, but I'm not sure I would, to be honest with you. There's a few others. So obviously I've said Alana McLaughlin, 145 pounds. Floyd Mayweather, boxer, he fights at 155 pounds. So he's actually not that big, funnily enough. Which, that amuses me personally. I feel like it would be kind of fun and interesting to see what would happen if I were to be in a ring with him. Anyway, Karate Wonder Boy, 170 pounds, so he's still in a weight class lower than me. Oliver Enkamp, brother of Jesse Enkamp, he's also 170 pounds, so he's 6 foot. Karate Wonder Boy, I think, is 6'3". Conor McGregor's quite small, and so is Floyd Mayweather. I also looked at Mike Tyson. He was fighting at 220 pounds, and he's 5'10". So I think if we were to look at his BMI, it might be about the same as mine. I'm not sure. Muhammad Ali, 236 pounds, and he was 6'3". So Muhammad Ali would have just towered over me. But I suspect the BMI thing would mean that his height to weight ratio was a bit lower than mine, which is interesting. And then we've got Khabib Nurmagomedov. Oh God, I hope I've got that right. He fights at 155 pounds also. He's 5'10". Barry McGuigan. Now, I do remember Barry McGuigan a little bit from when I was a kid, because my stepfather was quite into watching boxing, and I always remember him as a bantamweight. When I looked him up on the internet, they were saying he was a lightweight, but I suspect that was written by someone who didn't understand that lightweight is a specific weight category. Because when I found out his weight, he was 130 pounds. Or what he fought at when he was fighting was 130 pounds, and he's 5'6". So he's a bit taller than me, but quite a lot lighter. I think he's a little bit heavier now, but not a huge amount, to be honest. I've had a look at more recent pictures of him. He's really not put on that much weight. And I also thought it'd be fun to ask Shane Faison, because he's, physically he looks reasonable. He doesn't look big, he doesn't look thin, he looks about like I would expect an average male to look, and he told me that he's 155 pounds. So this is funny, I'm heavier than quite a lot of these people. Like, the only ones I'm not heavier than are these heavyweight boxers, Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali, which I find quite funny. Now, I do think, to a certain extent, the difference, the sort of weight class difference, is related to skill that's required. So if you look at boxing, they've got like 3 punches, and in gloves, you're not allowed to do any back fists or anything like that. There's no elbows, no knees, no kicks, nothing like that. It's very, very restricted what you can actually do in boxing. I suspect, and so I suspect it, and that's going to be a lot more reliant on brute force, essentially. And with wrestling, I've been to a couple of wrestling classes actually, and there is definitely more skill required with that. And that was the sort of show wrestling. It wasn't like freestyle wrestling or Greco-Roman wrestling, whatever it is. But I mean, there is definitely more skill required with wrestling than with boxing, because they just have a wider range of moves and strikes and stuff. And then when you get to the kind of martial arts that are in MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, karate, Choy Lee Fut, all of those kind of things, well, they are a lot more reliant on skill. And, you know, a lot of the time, you know, you've got two whole styles of martial art, kung fu, that are designed so that women could defend themselves and maybe beat men. You know, you've got Wing Chun, which is really famous, and that's what it was designed for. And then there's White Crane style, which is also designed by a woman to overcome men. So you can see that there is a lot more skill involved in those kind of martial arts, which does mean that they are less reliant on brute force. And I think that's partially what's reflected in the classes that are allowed for women in both wrestling and martial arts and in boxing. And I'm sort of quite intrigued by the fact actually that so I was looking through the MMA rankings and stuff, and through all the boxing rankings, world rankings and stuff, and I looked at the male MMA rankings for men my weight, middleweight category, and I hadn't really heard of any of them, to be honest with you. I'd heard of, but you know, the ones that you've heard of, they're actually lighter than me. And then the boxers that you tend to hear of, not all of them, but the ones that you tend to hear of are also actually tend to be quite big and heavy. I do sort of wonder if that's related to skill, because you do get a lot of small guys going to, you know, kung fu and taekwondo and stuff. Oh God, my voice is ridiculous. So, the thing I've found in martial arts lessons is that, and martial arts generally, is that men don't really like women who might beat them. So you keep the lower weight classes for women. Well, a bigger man is looking at a woman and thinking he can probably still beat her. Now, if you think about it, most women, like I'll just show you, I've got this graphic here about, this is women's weight. I don't know if you can see that really. Anyway, this is women's weight in England, white women, because it can vary, in England. Now, you look at the £145 category. Now, this is the 50th percentile, so this is the halfway mark. This is what average women are weighing, or this is up the midway between them. Anyway, so you've got £145. This is the line for £145. Now, obviously, women, it goes above that at age 45, quite obviously, and goes down again after 75. Now, the thing is that women are, on the whole, not likely to be fighting at that age in MMA. So I think we can discount that, to be honest. I mean, that I see no problem personally with fighting at my age, but anyway, I know that that's not like a normal thing. So you're looking at women from the age of about 20 to 35. You still just about got most women, but it's not great. So what we're looking at here is, and then women can get quite a lot heavier at all ages. Now, I've pretty obviously got muscle if you look at me, when I'm, not covered in loads of clothes. My biceps are pretty big. And I've got to say, this whole thing is, I'm quite certain that the women's MMA weight classes is about making sure that you look at women and you think, men who look at women fighting in MMA, they still think they can beat them. I'm quite certain of this because this has been my experience, that men do not like to see women they cannot beat. I've been training alongside them in classes, and now you'll get people who say I was like really disruptive in classes anonymously. They won't like have any particular thing that I did, and they'll always say it anonymously. But the thing that I did that was most annoying, that caused most trouble, was actually learn and actually progress. That was the thing that was upsetting everybody, is upsetting the men in particular. And it's not all men, okay? It's just a significant minority of men, but it's very easy for a significant minority of men, if it includes the teachers particularly, as it did in this case, to cause a lot of trouble if they don't like what you're doing. Now, there was something else I wanted to say here about when I've often had arguments about trans women fighting in MMA, and I did this a lot before I found out all this stuff about MMA. Like I said, it's been a relatively recent thing for me. And one of the things that they used to say was, I have come across a lot of men who have told me that no, the same woman of the same skill, even a higher skill, will always be beaten by a man. I have had that said to me a lot. Because men do not like to admit, although they'll say that a man of a higher skill could beat another man, they won't admit that a woman of a higher skill could beat a man of a lower skill. They just won't admit it, even though surely they know that's true. And I think they know that's true, and that's reflected in the women's MMA weight classes. So now that I know a bit more about this, like one of the things they used to say was Chris Cyborg would never be able to beat Conor McGregor. So you look at what I said earlier, what I was talking about earlier, and the thing is, I've had a couple of comments on Reddit about this as well. So I had a guy say to me, there was a woman in r/female fighters who said that she's a MMA fighter, but she finds it really hard getting matched because there's just not enough women around for her to fight. It's as simple as that. Now, this guy who was talking about the problem of talent flowing in at a glacial pace, well, that's why, because there just aren't the women. They don't have the experience to fight, and they're not getting much experience at a lower level. And this is due to the weight thing, actually, a lot of it. There was another comment I had from a reply I had from a man who said that he teaches girls who are really into fighting, they're really into getting into fighting, they want to get into fighting, and then they reach the age of like 16, 17, 18, and they become too heavy for the weight divisions, so they drop out. So this actually, this restriction on weight classes is really just stopping women getting in at a lower level, and it's stopping them from getting the experience at a lower level. Conor McGregor, I doubt very much had any trouble getting matched when he was at amateur level. Really don't think that's the case at all. And you look at that as well in his current, as a UFC fighter. You compare the how many men there are in each MMA weight division. There's loads of them. There's up to 50 of them, you know. Whereas you look at the women's, there's maybe 20 at the most. Some of them don't even have that. You know, they may have 10 or 15. So, and like I said, you've got a few women who just really dominate. Now, Chris Cyborg has not been challenged much. She's not had a chance to be challenged much because there's just not that many who are equal to her, who are anything like equal to her. Conor McGregor, on the other hand, you know, he's got like, I don't know, 50 others to choose from in his own, I think in UFC, within UFC, I think it's like 25, I don't know exactly. But anyway, he's got plenty of challenge. He's got plenty of people to fight. So both at amateur level and at the professional level, Conor McGregor's had a lot more chance to get the experience than Chris Cyborg has had. Another thing I'd like to point out is that Conor McGregor fights at 155 pounds, whereas Chris Cyborg fights at 145 pounds. She's in a lower weight class than him. It's not reasonable to compare them on that basis. It really isn't. You wouldn't take a man in a 145 pound division and say, well, if he can't beat Conor McGregor, that's because he's not as skilled. You wouldn't say that, because that's not how it works, and you know that's not how it works. So you shouldn't be saying that about Chris Cyborg. Until you get to the point where, you know, you've got more women who are able to participate in the first place and they're not dropping out when they get to adult size, even though they really want to fight, until you get to the point where women are getting the experience at amateur level and then they are also able to get the experience at professional level. And you've also got women who are as heavy as the men. You cannot compare women and men and say, if Chris Cyborg, you know, one woman lost to a man who are both world champions, then that means that women are rubbish at fighting and men are always better. That's not a fair comparison. But obviously, I don't see that being allowed to happen anytime soon because, like I said at the beginning, the reason you've got this weight class thing is because men want to see women, men don't want to see women who can beat them very often. Now, when I was initially having this discussion with Alana McLaughlin, she was saying it's the male gaze, and I think that's a fair point, actually. Men like to see thin, spindly women for some reason because they're ridiculous. But it's about more than that. It's about more than what men find attractive in a woman. They want to see a woman who doesn't look like she can beat him. You know, if there was a thing in martial arts where you had men who were wanting women to dominate them, I know about it by now. I've been doing this for 10 years, okay? I have not been getting messages from men saying, please, please step on me, I want you to totally dominate me. And I'm one who could dominate the vast majority of men in martial arts, I'll tell you now. I can do that. But they're not asking me to, they're not, and I don't see it in any of the comments that I see on YouTube about women. I don't see it anywhere. And I'm not saying there's no men who are like that in martial arts, but it's really not a thing. It's not a part of the culture in martial arts that you've got men who want women to dominate them. You've got men who like women who can fight, men who are into older women, that's definitely a thing. Neil Wilcott, my former teacher, his ex-wife, she's 4 years older than him. I'm actually a little bit older than him. The women that he paid most attention to in his classes were all older than him. So that's definitely a thing, I would say. But I don't think that's really about wanting women who can dominate them. I mean, so in Neil's case, it's because he, wants women to carry everything for him, and I think that's possibly the case with a lot of men who like older women. You know, they want women to, like, not necessarily, well, sort of be their mother. Ugh. Anyway, the thing is, it just, it's not that. They don't want women to dominate them. There are men who find women who can fight hot, and that's fine. Got no problem with that. That's great. That's definitely a thing. But unfortunately, men wanting women to dominate them is really not a thing. And even worse, I know this from personal experience, from my experience with Neil, from my experience with few men, is what they're really looking for is women that they can beat down. That's what they want to do to all women, actually. You've got a lot of women, and it's not all men in martial arts by any stretch, okay? But it's a significant amount of them. Yeah, they're looking at Chris Cyborg, they're looking at Ronda Rousey or whoever, and they're thinking it'd be really fun to just beat her down, dominate her, make her my, slave or whatever. And I know this is a thing that men like stronger women who fight back, because I have, one of my abusive exes was like that. He specifically told me that he liked the fact that I fought back, that I wasn't that easy to put down, because they like the process of breaking down a woman. And I'm afraid that's what a lot of men are more likely to be thinking when they look at Chris Cyborg and when they look at Amanda Nunes or whoever. And it's very sad. And that's really what's behind this whole thing with women's MMA weight classes.